Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. It gives Madam Chair Barbara Lee and I a great honor to honor such a great man who once walked the halls of Congress. U.S. Senator Teddy Kennedy made it possible for many of us who are elected now in voting for and supporting civil rights legislation was a man from one of the most privileged families in the United States of America that know what it meant to represent the common man and the common woman. And we at the CBC are honored to not only have his memory in our hearts, but to also recognize his purpose in Congress.
Senator Kennedy was not afraid of any issue. His tenure in the United States Senate spanned 47 years under 10 United States presidents. 10 United States presidents. He penned more than 300 bills, which became law, earning him the title of the greatest senator of this century. And tonight we are honored to bestow the Mickey Leland Award to the life and legacy of Senator Ted Kennedy. Accepting the honors for his late father, Senator Kennedy, one who reminded us that health care should not be a privilege but a basic human right, our friend and colleague, the Honorable Patrick Kennedy.
Thank you, Chairwoman Barbara Lee, and thank you, Congressional Black Caucus, for honoring my father, and thank you, Senator Kendrick Meek. I want to say, really the fight of my dad's life was for the dignity of the human person. It didn't matter what the issue was. It was the golden rule. Treat others as you would want to be treated. Health care, civil rights, housing, education. How would you want to be treated? That was the simple litmus test. And I think it's a litmus test that too often is ignored in the halls of Congress when people try to make policy for other people, discounting how this world affects them and forgetting the fact that many times the people who live in the Congress, who work in the Congress, often are separated from the real world realities that most of the people they represent face on a daily basis. And my father's most famous quote was, with respect to health care, why shouldn't the health care that is afforded the people of the United States Congress be afforded to the same people that they represent in these United States of America? So when the United States Congress votes on health care, perhaps they should look into their own health care coverage and ask the question, if it's good enough for me, why isn't it good enough for all of my constituents? But I would say today, perhaps the issue that he would speak on today that's more significant than any particular issue that he faced in Congress is the issue of whether we can take up issues, whether we can debate issues, whether we as a nation can actually come together as we have when we've been at the best in our society, and resolve our common problems as a community. Winston Churchill once said, "Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others." And in fact, with the tenor of the times that we see today, I would venture to say that the disagreement and dissent that he saw in his day have their place, yet there's no place for the vitriolic and hate-filled speech that has enraged our national discourse as of late. Left unchecked, such incendiary speech deteriorates the integrity of our democracy and threatens to distort our true identity of Americans and divert us from our desired destiny of bringing this country to peaceful resolution of our problems. We have stood in that place before, and we've stood there too long. It was a time when violence quelled progress, a time when words of hate and intolerance and veiled and unveiled racism ran amok before, during the 60s. And it was a time when not only Dr. King's life was taken, but it was a time when my uncle's lives were taken. So anybody who tries to make this an issue of race is sorely mistaken, because this is an issue of intolerance bordering on violence that cannot be permitted to continue in this country. If you wonder why I haven't dressed in a black tie tonight, it's because I had to come from my home state, from Rhode Island, after having gone to a town hall meeting. Yes, I went to one of those town hall meetings. But tragically, because of the volatile environment, I had to pay for my own security at that town hall meeting because of the sense of vitriol and unrest and threatening situations that we all as Congress people face whenever we go to those town hall meetings. Who amongst us can say that it's honestly free speech when someone raises a sign on the Mall of the United States Capitol 2 weeks after my father passes and says, "Let's bury Obamacare with Kennedy"? Who amongst us honestly can say that that kind of speech is truly any different than yelling fire in a crowded movie theater? And every American ought to know that this isn't an issue that's regarded by any one community in particular. This affects all Americans. When I was on the TV Larry King with my brother Ted, and all the questions always come back. Do you believe the Warren Commission? Was it a single gunman? The real question they're asking is, how could our institutions of government be so upended by single acts of violence because an environment was so permissive that that was allowed to continue and happen? My friends, those of us in Congress who are fearless enough to travel overseas in spite of the condemnation we often get by going on these foreign travels, will often tell you that we see the fact that in most parts of the world they decide who gets power based upon who has more guns, who has a bigger army, whose government is more oppressive. You might not think it in this age of 2009 going on 2010, but just think about how many people in the world live under oppression and violence. I'd venture to say more than a majority, probably more than 2/3 of the world's population is involved in civil conflict, living under tyranny or communism, or living under the threat of violence. So what we live in this country is an oasis. It's a miracle. Who can imagine that democracy has actually lasted this long. Do you realize that we are the longest continuing democracy in the whole of world history? It's nothing to be taken for granted, because I said it before, politics is a substitute for violence. And as Dr. King and others reminded us, evil exists where good people do nothing. When the national media looks the other way, and when the American public looks the other way and just looks and says, oh, that's just right-wing talk shows, or that's just a renegade extremist, they ignore the fundamental fact that this has been allowed to be propagated on the national airwaves. It's been allowed to seep into the national living rooms and be accepted because no one else has bothered to say that's unacceptable. So I wanted to be here tonight to say, with all the talk about memorializing my dad, there's one individual we have yet to memorialize property on the Mall of the United States. And the fellow that's chairman of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Commission's with us tonight, Harry Johnson. Will you come up for a second?
Thank you, Congressman Kennedy. To the Congressional Black Caucus, we thank Patrick Kennedy, we thank Congressional Black Caucus. I just want to tell you, where are we at with the Martin Luther King Memorial Project? Who would have believed some years ago when Alpha Phi Alpha members thought of the idea of building a national memorial to Dr. King that we would get one of the most coveted spots on the memorial, on the mall? We have a spot for Dr. King between the Lincoln and the Jefferson Memorial. And in my eyes and in your eyes, what better place to put a king than between two presidents? More than that, we have raised over the past few years $170 million out of the $120 million needed to build this memorial. What we are lacking, we are waiting patiently for a building permit to come from the National Park Service, and so I need your help, Congressional Black Caucus members. We need to get our building permit so that we can construct this memorial. And it will be the first memorial to a man of peace and a man of color. Thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, for your help. Thank you, Patrick Kennedy. And Chairwoman, thank you. Let's build the memorial to Dr. King.